Welcome back to Oh Gross. Today we will be re-airing an episode that was a really important conversation that Molly and I and Jenny had during the LA fires.
Yes.
So you guys get a little backstory, right, Molly? Last minute, we changed our whole programming, right?
Right.
The first episode we did, I literally was wearing my kids' headsets because I had no headsets with me and I had been evacuated and it was a hard time. And I called the girls and was like, hey, this is going to be a lot of work and it's going to be last minute. But we ended up doing like 5 different episodes and all the different aspects of crisis preparedness. And we talked to Kerry Sanders, who is a former NBC correspondent and an amazing human being, especially when it comes to miscommunication in crisis, what kind of information we need, and how we can all be more prepared in the future.
I think this is important too, at the start of a new year.
Yes.
To kind of get the information back out there. Make sure if you don't have a plan, go ahead and make that plan for the year.
And I also think a lot of times we forget when time has passed. After a year, you have to remember that this could happen to anyone again, right? And that these things are around us all the time. And this is a conversation that we should have every day. And it should be part of our New Year conversations and how we decide what our plan would be in our home, whether it be to-go bags or your exit strategy, or just in general, where do you get information when something in your town, in your home, or even when you're traveling is some of the things we touched on as well.
Good time to review, especially if you already have your go bag ready to go, if you already have your plan in place.
Yep.
Let's just go ahead and review it. Make sure you have everything that's needed in case you do need to get out quickly.
And also a refresher to refresh it.
Yes.
Check the batteries in your house, check your smoke detectors, check what your to-go bags might be or whatever your plan is.
Right.
But also I want to thank all the first responders. I want to thank the local news because in Los Angeles, we learned that like our local news at the time really came through for us. So I just want to remind everybody that I know we live in the world that there's so much information out there, right? That we get on socials and things like that. But your local news, your local community, check in with your fire department, get to know your community. This is the time for that. Like Molly said, it's the time to go down your list of the new year. And please comment. Do you have other questions? And we're nominated for a Webby actually for this episode.
Thank you.
So without any more talking from me,
stop it.
Here we go. We will start.
Let's go, Kara.
We will start our episode with Kerry Sanders.
Your gross out journey starts right here on Oh Gross.
Welcome back to our special edition episodes, Los Angeles Fires, Crisis Preparedness. So we will continue to talk about all different ways we can be more prepared in a crisis and hopefully answer a lot of the questions that people in Los Angeles have right now. And I think people all over the country, because when something big like this happens, we all start thinking about, are we prepared? And as we mentioned before, the word gross can be used in so many different ways. So at Oh Gross, we don't just talk about things that some people might think are disgusting or are afraid to talk about their health. We talk about things like gross oversight and gross miscommunication, which can happen in many ways. Anytime anything big happens, there can be a lot of gross oversight and gross miscommunication. So today we're going to focus on that aspect and how we can all be more informed and the best way to be informed. And also, what is the information that we need to help put out there as citizens, as a community, to help people. And the best way to do that, I think, is to talk to someone who has dedicated their life reporting crisis and getting information out there and staying in touch and in tune with the community. And we are so honored because today we are going to get to talk to Kerry Sanders. And he is an idol of mine as a journalist. When I was in J school, he was up there for me because I remember in high school him covering Hurricane Andrew and all these other disasters. And then the same breath, he was so connected with the community he was talking to. And you could tell from his heart that he was out there not to create alarm, but to get the information out there and save lives and let people know that, hey, he's there and he's there with them. So we are really excited to speak with him today.
I'm so excited.
He's also an idol of mine as well, going through public relations school. And I remember just watching him, and he is just such a great storyteller.
Yes.
He's very dependable. He just has a way of relating to the audience that just makes you feel like whatever he is discussing, you're right there along with him.
His heart has always jumped out at you, right? When he's covering something, right?
Yes, yes.
Never got in the way of his reporting, but the heart was always there. And I think it's going to be really good to hear his perspective on crisis coverage and what he's learned and how it's changed.
I think one of the things that really stuck with me about him is that he has really made a difference as far as in the health and science communities, because a lot of the stories he's covered, he has uncovered things that have helped save people's lives. And he has not been afraid to go out to those ground zero areas. And sometimes he's been there before first responders, but some of the information he's been able to give has been very important as far as scientific facts or health information that the public or even the first responders needed to know.
Yeah, 100%, Jenny. I agree. He is just a legend and, has over 30 years of experience and literally, I think, just retired in 2023. And I remember watching him as a child.
I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's going to be really wonderful to talk to him, and he'll be chatting with us here in a moment.
And just think about all the places that he's been. He's
Yes.
literally been to every single continent.
He's been from the North Pole to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Right.
Imagine
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
just imagine what he's seen in his years of journalism.
But also letting the audience know the real danger without freaking people out, but letting them know the real danger in the same breath.
Do you always feel like at the end of the day, everything is going to be okay?
Hi, Kerry. How are you doing?
How's it going, guys?
Hello.
Hi, Kerry.
Once again, we are honored to have Kerry Sanders with us, an Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist with 32 years at NBC News and has been reporting for over 40. I grew up watching you. I went to journalism school and you were one of my idols. You have covered over 50 states and over 65 countries. And every time you came on air, I remember being, I think, 14 years old during Hurricane Andrew and just watching you and knowing that we were getting correct information and yet feeling that you were there with everyone as part of the community. So we are just so honored to have you here today.
Well,
you have
thank
no
you.
idea. There's so much we want to talk to you about, but we want to start with the Los Angeles focus. And you have covered so many crises
Right.
and in a way that there's no room for error in communication. And in the work you've done has been so important for people to get the correct information. And I think what we're seeing here is there's a lot of misinformation that is kind of being disseminated.
Yeah, and that is a function, I believe, of, not to put the blame on it, but social media, which doesn't have an editor. It's not that the function of putting information on the internet is the problem. It's that there is no editor. So let me give you a story. I'm in the field and I see something. I see a fire moving one direction, or I see a bridge that looks like it's been impacted by whatever the calamity is, the natural disaster, as opposed to immediately going on the air and saying that traveling at this direction and looking at that, it's definitely going to be a problem. It's more likely going to be, I'm looking at this, we are checking with authorities to see what they know. And then
Right.
I have a team that works with me. There are producers, there are desk editors. Those are people who are not in it, not in the chaos, who are then talking to the authorities and saying to, let's say it's a bridge, the Department of Transportation. And the Department of Transportation says, we put up some do not cross an hour ago. Are you telling me it's not there? Yes, we're telling you it's not there. Then I'm on the air saying, we know that this is dangerous. The Department of Transportation put up do not cross this bridge. Why that's not there, we don't know, but we're telling you that is a suspect way to take your vehicle or even to go on foot. So I would be highly concerned, as opposed to somebody who just gets on the internet and posts on social media, that bridge will collapse if you walk on it. That may not even
Right.
be true. And we
Right.
don't know whether it's true. And
Right.
that bad information could trap somebody. There could be somebody standing there going, I don't know what to do.
Right. And I might cross it even because I don't know what the information is correct. And then I might put
Right.
myself in a dangerous
Right.
situation.
So it's really about what social media has done. And that is, it's given everybody the power to share information, but without checking information.
Without your three sources.
You know,
right?
I was just
exactly.
going to say that.
You know the old expression, if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. You know? Right.
That was the next question we were going to ask you was too, how have you seen reporting change in the digital era?
I will say that I think one of the biggest shifts, again, I reported for NBC for 32 years. I reported for 40 years.
Right.
I think the biggest shift that we've seen is live television and live everywhere. We didn't have that ability for the longest time. The technology changed, and I'm not talking about satellite trucks or microwave trucks. I'm talking about the little backpacks that you can wear.
Oh, I know.
Oh, yes.
I was one of the executive producers on Live PD, and that technology changed everything.
Imagine I was sent down to the Amazon when the fires were burning and we were destroying the Amazon, we as humankind, and the smoke is not only drifting, but a lot of people are worried about the impacts of the, I guess they call it the lungs of the earth, are burning. And I'm in the middle of nowhere, and because the loggers need to communicate, they have cell phone towers in the middle of the Amazon in Brazil, and we're able to go live from where they're burning down the Amazon. That's a huge difference. Things have changed in remarkable ways, but it also means that the experience of reporting becomes that much more critical.
Right.
You are live, but if you're live, you need to rely on your experience from other events when somebody tells you something to determine how you're going to use that. Because in a live situation, you may go do an interview with somebody and somebody may say something that then the experienced reporter would say, interesting, we're going to check that out. We're not sure how accurate that is. That's
Right.
very important information, as opposed to just running with that.
And that's it. And I noticed too in the coverage, I don't know if you saw this, but the girls and I were talking about how streamers have changed everything too. So there's multiple choices on where you get your news. And if you are the kind of person who didn't have local news, you would be getting misinformation on evacuations.
I think what we saw here with these fires was not only the reminder to the public of how critical your local news sources are, but also that if you don't have a TV, which a lot of millennials certainly don't watch TV,
Right.
Gen Zers don't watch TV, if it's all about your phone, are you really relying on a TikTok influencer versus streaming, whether it's
Yeah.
KTLA, KNBC, whomever? And I think we've seen, just the statistics show it from Nielsen, that a lot of people went to find it to their traditional sources of information. And for a certain generation, it's the first time they probably said, who do I rely on? Because
Right.
they had not questioned that before.
Yeah. I think that's really
That's so
important.
interesting in that way. I mean, because we are just so used to going to our TVs, going to radio even to listen and see what's happening. So Generation Z, millennial, they're consuming media in a completely different way.
All of a sudden, people that we've worked with who are Gen Z had all the different apps. They were actually streaming the local news because that was the most accurate information.
I guess my question to Molly would be, since you work with the PR side of it, when you're talking about the people who would use the social media to get a message out and not self-serve, because there's always that going
Right,
on, how do
right.
you advise them of what role they should play? Because from my side of the street, they don't belong out there saying anything initially other than, our building burned down, this is the address, and it's consumed the whole neighborhood. As opposed to trying to give information, I would much rather hear it from CAL FIRE than I would from the furniture store owner who lost his entire building, other than our hearts are out for the people who worked here, and we
Right.
thank CAL FIRE for trying to help. But what do you advise folks to do? Because we know that some people decided, well, I'm now a source of information because I'm in the middle of it.
Right. I'm an eyewitness.
I mean, I think it all goes back to PR in general. It's all crisis management. So again, you talked about having editors and people that fact check stories. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure that the facts are checked.
So the app Citizens, that we saw was very problematic locally here because Citizens doesn't have any sort of filter. So it's not like the Watch Duty app that people were using.
I can tell you that over the years, people have used out of context footage to promote causes or cause confusion. It's probably well documented that there have been things in the Middle East in terrorist attacks where footage has made its way out to the public, believing that something happened when it was actually old file footage from something that happened in Chile down in South America and had nothing to do with going on. But there is an expression, which I want to say was Mark Twain, that I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's something to the effect of a lie travels around the world faster than it takes you to put your shoes on in the morning.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's true.
It's very true.
And how do you navigate that? Like in your career, like in now, especially once you saw the digital age coming in, how have you navigated that?
Well, it started that I never used to recognize it. I felt that initially my job is not to tell you that what you have read is wrong. Let me just tell you what's correct. But there was an evolution, and the evolution was, and this is not strictly in a sense of a natural disaster. This is just the news media in general taking hits. In the evolution, people said, well, if you didn't report it, you purposely left it out because you have an agenda. So we then had to move to the next level, which was to say that this is unverified information or this is out there and it's wrong. But as a reporter, and again, we're not going to talk strictly about a natural disaster. Let me just talk about news in general. You have a very finite period of time to tell your story. When there's a natural disaster, you're on 24, you can go. But in a finite newscast, the time that I spend telling you this isn't correct or this is bogus is time taken away from me telling you what is going on. And so for the longest time, I felt I did not want to give that time up because I had important things to say. But now you got to recognize the fact that everything that is going on with the misinformation, and I don't know whether it's driven by maliciousness or it's just people who think they know and they don't, it's important to have that fact check because, and this is a function of how the mind works, you hear that, you see that, it sets it in your mind, and then when it's corrected, it's still in the back of your mind the way you first heard it.
Yeah.
Kara, two things that deserve a check mark of this worked. The cell phone towers primarily held, and that meant texting worked. You have to understand that very often that is not the case, depending on the calamity, and that type of communication is so critical. So that's a positive. Another really meaningful piece of information, and again, I used to work at NBC. I believe others have this technology, but what KNBC had with their helicopter, being able to lay over the technical layout of roads and show people what was going on, so incredibly valuable. There were reporters announcing, I'm at this corner and everything else, but the actual maps.
That map was so helpful.
That maps, yes.
That map was so helpful.
It saved lives. And I know that there are people who, on another day, might look at that and go, that's some sort of technical trick about traffic delays from some football game or something. Not at all. This is the type of investment that traditional media has spent, I imagine, hundreds of thousands, if not more than $1 million, to be able to do that in real time. And it's only now that you say, well, what's the difference between legacy media and that blogger down the street? Well, there you go.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up the map because we haven't talked about that. I mean, it really was so helpful for so many people.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
I think, too, here with the air quality, what's been even on a different level, too, there's jargon that's being used that nobody understands, right? So sometimes the information isn't coming out in a way that you're supposed to, which is a third grade reading level, that anyone can understand it. And I think what we're seeing is, especially an urban fire of this magnitude with so many structures being burned. And when someone starts talking about air quality, remember in LA, we were used to monitoring our air quality. We all look and see how our air is because of smog, right? And that whole AQI and everything. But what's being burned into the air isn't being monitored. There's no app you can open up and know, okay, well, you have formaldehyde burning in the air today.
Actually, there is no app now. I think there will be. I think
there will be. I was going to say, this is something we're learning because I've talked to 3 different doctors who have all given me great information about air quality. But it still is so if you're under 100 here in Los Angeles, like in the smog ratings, you're moderate, right? Like you want to be under 100. And they're saying that if you are in a burn zone now, if you're over 60, you should be wearing a mask, because that's the only way they can sort of give a range, because we don't know what's in that smog.
Look, we saw this after the World Trade Center, where we were told everything is fine. Everybody who is a first responder, their health is not impacted. And this was from the federal government. This was stated as a fact. And then the firefighters later discovered that they were all coming down with cancers,
Asbestos,
with
yeah,
exposure to asbestos and
yeah.
everything else. I mean, I think the question is probably best to Jenny, our scientist, which is the real-time analysis of that kind of science, even if you have the gear, is suspect, because it takes analysis. And I think you know better than me, you don't just hold it up and instantly get a response. You have to analyze it.
Exactly. I mean, I've read reports where they are saying that you have to treat ash at all like a hazardous material, and each area of ash is going to have different chemicals in it based on, was it a home? Was it a business? Was it somewhere where they were melting plastics, or a lab? So they are having to go in and actually analyze each section before they can determine if it's safe for a human to go back into that area.
And not even
and
consider
anytime
the
you
wind.
disturb the ash,
And the
right?
wind, Kerry. And
Right.
also,
wind.
a big thing over here now, they're talking about lawn blowers, like with the lawn care, right?
Oh.
Having the leaf blowers, because
Right.
what are they blowing yard to yard? So my understanding is that they're sort of being outlawed, or loosely outlawed right now for that exact reason, Jenny. Like, what are you blowing? We don't know. And if the wind has carried something.
Look, I covered the fires in the Smoky Mountains a couple of years ago, and the problems that the folks had there were repeated here in portions of this fire, which is very hard to get out because so many cars get on the road, small roads, not sure which way to go. And it truly is a opportunity now, not just for LA, but for our nation, to recognize that the EOCs, the Emergency Operations Centers, which seemingly only pop up when there's a calamity, are actually there all the time working on these solutions, and maybe need a little bit more authority and a little bit more, I don't know whether it's money, but ability to come up with real answers. Because when, as you guys know, when this happens, it happens so quickly. How do you respond instantaneously?
Even this alert system, do you guys have that in Florida? We have this.
We have more
now we
alerts
have
than you can imagine in Florida because of hurricanes. We don't have to determine what to do in an instant. We know 5 days out what's going on.
Right. And then your phone goes off almost like an Amber Alert.
Exactly.
And that's what we had.
Exactly.
But there were so many alerts going off because we were so close to multiple fires. It was very hard to determine which fire was first. We'd have to go look at our local source. I'd go into our next door, ask the
Right.
neighbors, on Facebook, did you guys get this alert? Is this one, who's it for? And they started getting more specific. and they had
I have a different take on this, okay? Stand outside, look around, and there is no cost to 99% of the people to get in the car and leave and
Yeah.
just come back. I do not understand the reluctance to leave, especially when it is a moment-by-moment crisis.
Yeah.
Why give yourself less moments?
I totally agree with you. I was ready to leave right away, but the girls know. The girls are in Georgia, and we're good old friends, but they knew I was ready to leave right away. We kind of, as a household, decided, okay, once we were even close to the set, because they had the get ready, set, go, we were going to leave. And it's also, we have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old, you know what I mean?
Right.
We just be extra safe. But I got to tell you, I had tons of friends very reluctant, even when they were in the set zone, or even in, until someone was knocking saying you have to evac. Now, there are a lot of people who just, I don't know what it is, but there is some sort of psychology behind not wanting to
Well,
leave.
let me take you to a hurricane, which is a little different, obviously, because you have time to plan. And I know people who don't want to leave in hurricanes, generally driven by the anger that comes after a hurricane, which is you can't go home. I want to go home and check to see what happened to my house. And people say they want to not leave because they know the roadblocks are going to go up and they're going to be prevented from coming back, and they want to come back. They're always concerned about not only exposure of what could happen after a hurricane. Okay, my roof ripped open, but it wasn't in this part of the house. If I don't come back, I can't salvage that part of the house. And also, what the authorities do that they couldn't do in a fire, but is very effective. The authorities will come around after making their announcements on the PA about what they call a mandatory evacuation, but nobody's under a mandate to leave. And they'll go, give me your arm. I need to write your name and your social security number and a phone number for the next of kin. So when you die, we can identify your body. That scares the dickens out of people, and it works. But
Yeah.
you can't do something like that in a crisis like a fire, because the winds come from one direction, the next minute they're going another direction, and this happens too quickly for an officer to come up and say, give me that information.
You know, you brought up a really good point. There was some coverage here. I remember watching a story where an area had been evacuated, you know, they said, and a couple people had stayed back to like fight the fires off themselves with a hose. And a reporter went and was talking to them and was like, you know, continue doing what you're doing and protecting your home. And I remember at home thinking, was that really responsible? I mean, have you ever been in a situation like that where people have been evacuated and some people are staying back, and you have to sort of balance reporting, but also making sure that the information you're not putting out there is going to be bad information for other people who need to evacuate and be prepared?
I generally tend to use this opportunity to give people the chance to have their own identity and do whatever they want. And this happened. I know I keep going back to hurricanes, but I spent a lot of time, more than 100 named storms in my career. As a reporter, I have cajoled people, and I think in a soft way, to say, in my questions, what is the cost for you and your family to leave that is preventing you from not going? I can tell you, I have met people who have no money. They can't go to a hotel. They don't have a friend. They have a dog. They have a cat. They can't be let into a shelter because they have an animal. They don't want to go to a shelter because it's crowded, and they're concerned about all those sort of things. And in my efforts to ask the questions, hopefully cajole them into saying the options are discomfort or death. Help me out understanding that, as opposed to saying to them, because it's not my job, you know, staying here, you might die. Why would you do that? It's more of a nuanced way, which at times has actually impacted. Other times it hasn't. I mean, I can give you a story of a family that stayed put in a hurricane when they absolutely should have left. Hurricane Ian hit the west coast of Florida. After the hurricane hit, I met a woman. She was despondent. She had survived, but she was despondent. And this was a remarkable story. Her husband had also survived the hurricane because the storm surge, which is all the water that comes in and drowns people. More people die from drowning than they do from flying debris. Her husband was an invalid. He was actually unable to move his arms and legs. And he was in the living room in a hospital bed that they had put in the house, you know, the one that leans up and back with electronic controls and everything. She had lashed a tarp over him in case the water came through the windows and there was flying debris from glass. She had put underneath that, she had put a life preserver on him, and she had prepared that if it all came, she hoped that he floated up in the water, would survive, and then come down. Now, remarkably, he survived. I said to her, I do not understand why you didn't evacuate. This makes no sense to me. She goes, I just didn't have anybody who could help me get out. And unfortunately, in Los Angeles, we have heard similar stories of people in wheelchairs, families who just thought that they were going to get the help and didn't get it, and unfortunately died. And so I think in those crazy moments, stop and think of your neighbor and ask them if they're okay. Because they may say, I don't know how to move Joey from point A to point B. I can't get him in the car. That might be something that you can do to help somebody. And it's only in the aftermath that we're beginning to hear that, and this is natural, you're thinking about yourself, you're thinking about your family, where you don't turn to your neighbor and go, you okay?
Absolutely. Community.
And we live in such a digital world that we've gotten so far removed from that, as we keep talking about.
Yeah.
And it's so important because you don't know who's okay or not. And half the information I got was literally from me texting neighbors or texting someone and saying, hey, what are you seeing?
But that's good information, isn't it? Isn't that good information? Yeah. And again, it's coming from somebody you know, and you're saying, what do you see out your window that I can't see? Versus, what's the governor doing right now? That governor, he's wasting all our time and money.
Right.
That wasn't what you cared about at the time.
No.
But that's what began taking on a life, the mayor, the governor, all that nonsense that some of it turns out to be a good question, but not in the crisis, not in the moment.
Yeah,
And it's a question. It's not necessarily true or informational.
Yeah, it's not helping in the moment. And we even had people after we evacuated, we had friends who were in what we call the flats because we're in the hills, and they were texting us updates and saying, listen, even though this evac is gone, the air quality is really bad by you, and the winds could shift again, because they knew that my husband's a cancer survivor and my son has asthma, and they were giving me updates from the neighborhood and saying, listen, if I were you, if you can stay away a day or two, still wait it out, because we know that this air would be bad for you. But there were so many things going on at the time that not even the news can't report on all those things. You know what I mean? You need your community to kind of tell you what's going to be best decision for you.
Absolutely.
If you were to give us like 3 big takeaways that you think everyone can learn, not just from this fire, like you said, you've covered tons of hurricanes and multiple fires.
I've covered
everything.
Natural disaster but one.
Everything.
All but one, which is volcano. So I've covered every single natural disaster, from ice storms to mudslides to you name it. I've done them all. So what are my takeaways well, first of all, kind of like the Boy Scout line of be prepared, but it's really true. When you move to an area, you need to be aware of what potentially can happen. The second thing goes back to what I said, which is think about why you wouldn't leave. And there's probably no reason you wouldn't leave. You should probably say to yourself, I'm going to leave, and let me have an idea of what I might do. And the third takeaway is probably, they say 1 to 2, 3 back to 1. Always be prepared. You have to know. And you live in a place where there's a lot of fires. I mean, if you have not seen a fire in LA, you're a relatively new person to California. You know that these happen. Now, whether they happen near you, that's a whole other story, but they happen. Why would people be completely unaware? I see this in hurricanes all the time. Florida has a lot of people who move to this state, and the biggest problem we have is a Category 1 or a tropical storm comes in, it misses where you live, and then a year later, there's a Category 4 coming in, and those people say, I've been through a hurricane, this is nothing to worry about, and they've never really been through a hurricane at all. What's the takeaway? The takeaway is you learn something. Yeah. Not only did you learn something that is valuable to you and valuable to share with others.
LA has got a lot of transplants too. I mean, a lot of people who have moved here from other parts of the country. So, I mean, myself, while I've seen fire, and I've had fire. When I was in the flats on the east side, there was a fire in the hills and we could see it really close. I don't think anyone was expecting it to go so urban.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's the false sense of security you have.
It's false sense of security. Yeah.
It's not going to impact me. Those people who live in the woods, they might love living in the woods, but look at that nightmare they have. No, it's everybody. Look, the thought here is, and I'm going to ask Jenny again to weigh in on this science point of view. I don't think we've really found a place in our country now that we will not have a natural disaster, whether it's a blizzard in Maine, a fire in California, a tornado in Oklahoma, a hurricane anywhere along the Gulf Coast, up the East Coast. I'm not sure there's a place that you can say, oh, that's where you go to get away from it. Is there?
I don't think there is. I mean, we can have a dissertation about the way that our climate's changing and all of that. But one of the things that I take away from all of this is, again, going back to the preparedness, and that as citizens and neighbors, we should be prepared and know who our local authorities are, know where to get our sourced news and information from. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that, even for myself, we were just talking last week about how in my basement, for example, I didn't even know myself what the most safe place in the basement to go to was if there was a tornado. So basic things, in our homes, what can I do around my property that might help prevent a fire from occurring on my house or my neighbors?
The brush in LA.
Right.
Well, now we also have to worry about flooding. I mean, we're in mudslides after all this too. Yeah. Now, if the rain does come in.
And if you've ever experienced a mudslide, which I don't know whether you have, it's just like a fire. There's nothing you can do. When that's happening, it's not like you're going to be able to run away.
No, I mean, we had flood warnings last year. There's a joke with the girls know this. Every time my husband has to leave town for anything, something crazy happens. And he left town. And all of a sudden there was flash flood warnings down our street. Mm-hmm. And I told him, because he didn't get to see it. It was a complete panic. I mean, we saw at the bottom of our street a car float within seconds. You know what I mean? They were able to thankfully they were able to control it, but it literally, even with the flash flooding, it happened so quickly that it was coming down that hill, and we're like in the middle of the hill, and it was coming from above, and by the time it hit the bottom, it was very terrifying. I want to go circle back though about preparedness. So when I moved, so I lived in New York for 3 years, kind of bi-coastal, when I was doing the show Live PD. And I remember Dan Abrams and Tom Morris Jr., they said to me, do you have a bug out bag? And I was like, what is a bug out bag? Why do I need a bug? They're like, you're in Manhattan now. You have to have a bag if you ever have to go. So that was the first time I'd ever heard that term. And I do have a bag, but my husband and I were talking the other day, and this is a question, he grew up in Florida, that he wanted me to ask you. You have a different bag for fire than you have for just leaving the city or earthquake. Like someone like yourself who has navigated so many different crises, do you have different bags for different situations?
It's a go bag and not a bug out bag, but it's the same thing. I love it.
I think Tom called it bug out.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. It's street cred. I love the way it sounds. So I'll tell you what is in my bag, and the most important thing is, when I say this, is something I learned from the U.S. Marine Corps, because I was embedded with them in 2 different wars, and I learned quite a bit from them. And it's the word redundancy. So you need some sort of eye protection. You need 2, maybe 3. For hurricanes, you need some sort of boots. You need 2. You're in a fire zone. You need steel-toed shoes with steel bottoms. Same for tornado locations, because you're going to be walking after the fact. You don't need to step on a nail. You need power cords for your phone. You need multiple power cords. I guarantee you will lose a power cord, or one will get caught in the door and you'll be in trouble. So you need 2, maybe 3. You need a backup battery for your phones. Now, I'll tell you, as a reporter, you need more than even that. You need 2 phones, and you need 1 phone on T-Mobile, 1 phone on Verizon. You need them on 2 different systems. I actually used a system where I used 1 phone number for both phones. It's kind of antiquated now, but it works really well. Google Voice has a way that you can just set up a phone number and you can direct it to any phone you want. That's for texting messages, and that's also for phone calls. So if one phone's working and the other one isn't, I'm getting the text, I'm getting the phone. It was just sort of my go-to. Then you need to think about food and water. So what are you going to put in your go bag? Well, you're not going to put candy, which is the number one thing people think that they want to do. Let me put candy in there. It'll be sugar. It'll give me all the energy I need, and I'll get through it. But what happens is, and I can tell you, having worked with crews who all did this, is that sugar high drops. And when the sugar high drops, you're worthless. So, granola bars, things that aren't going to go bad, you could live them in there for a year. If you don't need the bag, it'll be fine. But you need this kind of stuff just to take the edge off. Water, I know some people probably in LA are more concerned about, that's been in a canteen for a year. When I drink it, trust me, when you're thirsty, you'll drink it. But those sort of things, if you have time, which in a fire you don't, but in other calamities you do, you want to buy tons. You want to consider the fact that it's not just you're buying for. 1 pallet of water is not enough. You need to buy, assuming it's available, 4 pallets of water. Or how about this? You don't need to buy plastic bottle to begin with. Everybody has seen at a football game that pouring of the Gatorade over the coach's head. Get one of those. Keep it in your house. When the calamity is coming, fill it up, get a couple paper cups. You will have water the whole time, as opposed to this needing plastic bottles. The other thing that does is, and bottles help too, but I'm speaking now about concern for the environment, just wasting time with all these plastic bottles that wind up in the garbage. But you will help other people, because as planned as you are, I can guarantee you other people are not planned. I'm going to speak as a reporter. What does that mean when I run across Kara or Jenny or Molly, and you guys are unknown to me, I don't know you, it's a crisis, you're emotional, you might even be crying, everything looks like it's come to an end, your life is falling apart, and I come over to you and I go, would you like some water? I shared that with you, and you know how powerful that is? It calms people down. It gives them a chance to say, oh my God, somebody did something for me. And that becomes a very, very useful method of not only being human, but calming somebody down and then asking them, would you like to tell me about what happened? and what you've gone through. More often than not, people are like, wow, he didn't walk up to me with a camera, stick a mic in my face and go, what happened? But rather was human to begin with.
The water you gave, was it Katrina? I remember, right?
Oh,
it was. I remember that really famous
Yes,
coverage.
it's really quite famous.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. During Katrina, in the aftermath, I had a helicopter for a month to fly anywhere I wanted, to do anything I wanted. And I needed to get fuel. We made our way to the commercial airport, and we landed. As we're getting fuel, one of the guys filling fuel goes, have you been inside the airport? I go, no, I don't think anybody's been in there. And he goes, you need to go over there. There's a lot of evacuees there. So we make our way over to the other side of the airport after we refueled, landed, and I go in. And inside, they had evacuated all of the nursing homes as best they could into the structure of the airport. And so people are laying on baggage claim belts, and there's people all over the place. When I tell you the elderly and the infirm, whatever that image in your mind is, it's worse because they have been abandoned in just laying there. There's no attention to them. This has been going on now for days. And so in my effort to go through, there's this elderly gentleman who's laying there and he can barely whisper. He's out of it, but he knows he needs some water. And I got him some water, came over, gave him some water. The cameraman shot it. That really wasn't the plan, but I gave him some water, comforted him. And within about 4 hours, he was on a plane that the National Guard had brought in and flew him off who knew where. And later, his family contacted me, first to find out where he was, which I couldn't help them do because I didn't have all the information I needed. But eventually, they contacted me back and said that unfortunately he had passed away. But that moment on camera of him having some stranger help him out gave them so much comfort and so much good feelings about what they know was a horrible end to his life. And so it brought home to me that when you're there and you have, as a reporter, you got a lot to do. Your job is very intense, minute by minute, second by second. Take a moment, take a breath, look around, and if there's something you can do, be human as much as be a reporter.
Wow.
I think that's just great advice for everyone in general.
I think so. I think that's when it goes back to ask your neighbor, you okay?
Absolutely.
It's an education when you're in the middle of it, and it's certainly an education on the backside. But I got to think that there's not a person in LA today, whether they were impacted or not, that hasn't at least stopped and thought to themselves, what we do. And there's no silver lining to such horror, but that's at least a good thing that people would stop and ask themselves that question.
Mm-hmm. For me, at least, I don't know one person who doesn't know somebody who was directly impacted by this fire. And all the conversations we've all been having are exactly that. Like, what would we do? I never thought about mudslides. And now we're like, well, we have to think about that. And we should think about all of this. And that the earthquake kit isn't just like a little kit you forget about for like 6 months. I mean, I pulled out my earthquake bag and when we were leaving for the fires, and I was like, what is in here? I didn't even know it was in there because I had done it so long ago.
Right.
And these are things you should stay on top of as a family and no matter where you live. And I think that's so important for people to know.
If depending on how old your kids are and stuff, what plans do you have if you're in different places
right.
during an earthquake? Do you have a safe word that you send to each other?
Yeah, or a meeting place, right? That know if all communication goes down. I think a lot of us are thinking about that. Where would you meet?
When I was a teenager, I lived in South America in Peru, and we had earthquakes, and it was just a function of life, all pre-internet and pre-cell phones and everything else. But we knew where to go when the house started shaking and things started falling. We knew what to do, or at least what to get under.
Hopefully this will make people a little more aware, though, and in being prepared. Like I was saying last week, Molly and I own a business, and one of the things that we do is put up an escape route in case of a disaster for each building that one of our clinics is in. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself the other day, I don't know if I've actually taken the time to really look at that.
Yeah, it's always after the fact, and I think you're so spot on. I will tell you that when I stay in hotels, I always ask for ground floor or first floor, if it's possible. Sometimes you're on the 30th floor and there's nothing you can do. And I look before I get in my room, which way is the emergency exit? Not that I am going to see the red sign that says exit, but rather if I come out the door, it's to the left. That's what I need to know. I come out the door, it's to the right. I need to remember that. That's just a small thing, but you need to stop and think
awareness.
about it.
Yeah. And I think the simple things too, like, so I've worked with a lot of first responders. I have a fire blanket in every room, okay, in my house. And I was just thinking the other day, I have never showed my 5-year-old, it was my 10-year-old said to me, Mom, how do we use those? And it's just, you don't think about, you might know where something is, but making sure your whole family understands, or even the seatbelt cutter I have that was given to me, by a fireman friend, showing my kids what that is.
Right.
Right. On the keychain, where we have this fear of, like, knock on wood, not talk about something. It is that you're afraid to talk about these things that could happen. But if you talk about it, then you know what to do in the moment, and you're not, fear isn't taking over.
Right. That seatbelt cutter, which everybody in Florida should have because we're surrounded by water. It's not only the seatbelt, but it's the little piece of metal at the end that will break the window.
Absolutely.
Everybody thinks a window on a car is easy to break. You take a baseball bat to do it and it bounces right off. It's really hard to break it. You need to do it down in the lower corner with that little piece of metal to shatter it, to then push it out.
Yeah, and
if you've never done that, if you've never actually broken a window in a car, and I would say 90% of the people would say, why would I? You don't know that. But as a reporter doing demonstration stories, I've done it, and I recognize how really hard it is, and you have to get it in the right place and how hard it is and everything else.
There's all these little things that we can sometimes have, but we don't know how to use them, or we don't know what to do with them, or we don't talk about what to do with them. It's so true. I mean, what I saw happen with my kids, especially my daughter. My son's 5, and he's still processing it, and but my daughter, there was a lot of huge anxiety that kicked in right away.
Why shouldn't there be?
Of course, a lot of it is the situation. It's totally valid. But also I thought later afterwards, I was like, 30% of that could have been dealt with if she had known she had a plan, right? And she had known she was part of the plan. And it's just the way her brain works. And that's what we're doing now, is we're trying to talk about plans and explain things to her so that she feels, because even the anxiety after, when you come back the first night, she wanted me to stay up all night watching the news again. That was her big thing. If I go to bed, you have to watch the news all night, right? Because there was that, the fear of making sure that we were getting all the information. But I think all this preparedness helps that.
Being exposed to that, not in I need to prepare you because this could be scary, but rather I'm empowering you to learn something, is a whole other kind of like need that probably doesn't happen in a life where everybody's busy and getting a kid's attention off TikTok is not easy.
Right, or YouTube, right? YouTube Kids.
At the end of the day, realize that you are your own savior. And if you're going to get the information, figure out who you're going to get the information from, how you're going to get it. And ideally, if that becomes a habit in your life, you'll actually know a lot more about your community, about what the local school board is doing, what the city council is doing, and all those other little pieces that you say to yourself, it doesn't impact me. Ultimately, it does.
This concludes the first part of our 2-part episode with Kerry Sanders. So make sure you stay tuned for another episode dropping this week.
If you're listening and haven't followed us yet, take a moment to hit that follow button. Stay informed and never miss an important conversation that can make a real difference.
Find value in today's Oh Gross episode? Share it with friends, family, or anyone who could benefit from hearing these insights.
Follow us on socials at It's Oh Gross for updates, resources, and more helpful discussions.
Oh, gross. That drama's about to end, 'cause gross. Stop asking for a friend, taboos. Icky's what we do. Psoriasis, podiatrist, and pinworms too. It's so gross. No need for strife, because gross. Life is part of life, it's just science. Yeah, it's not so weird. We got the facts, nothing to fear. Oh, gross. It's just science, no, it's not weird. It's just science, nothing to fear. It's just science, so wipe those tears. It's boogers and rash and that sticky scratch. Oh, gross. That drama's about to